What do you want me to talk about? Just anything?
So just tell me, how do you feel like enhancing your smile is just going to affect your normal day stuff, your profession work, your relationships? Like what's going to happen for you?
So I started a company out in Chicago, a solar company, and it's very difficult for me to want to get on video and do social media ads, kind of like you had. That's how we found you, was on Instagram. So it's hard for me to want to do that. We're having to use other people in the company, and I feel like I could do a really good job. But the problem is I don't have enough confidence because of 2 chips on my front teeth and, the colors, so, and some of the gaps. And so what I wanted to do is be able to fix my teeth, gain more confidence as I'm losing weight, and then I'll feel more confident getting on camera and doing a lot of we have YouTube and Facebook ads that we do, and I want to be.
Tell me how you feel about your smile now.
Good. I love my smile. I was actually scrolling through my phone the other day, yesterday, actually last night, and I was trying to find a photo of myself smiling with my mouth open, and I scrolled through everything, and the only thing that I found was an actual video where I had to open my mouth to talk. So I literally have 0 photos of me smiling with my mouth open. And the last few days when I've gotten my new teeth, we've done family pictures, and now I even up on my social media, I have a new profile photo with me smiling with my mouth open, and it's hard for me to stop closing my mouth now. So
that's awesome.
What is a smile? It's more than a set of teeth. It's a feeling inside, waiting to get out. And what does it take to create a beautiful smile? It takes practice and patience. It takes attention to detail. It takes a desire to be the best. It takes the right materials and a dedicated team committed to your vision. We care about every smile you create because your patients are our patients. With our innovative line of dental materials, intimate educational courses, expansive array of online resources, and the most knowledgeable customer care department in the industry, Cosmedent is here to help you succeed. With the right materials, there is no limit to what you can do. No matter the patient's need, no matter the challenge, together, we can do this. Creating a smile is worth it. Because a smile is more than a set of teeth. A smile is happiness. A smile is reassurance. A smile is satisfaction. A smile is confidence. And a smiling patient means a smiling dentist. Cosmedent, spreading smiles.
Well, it's just about 12 o'clock, so welcome everyone. We're waiting for Dr. Hansen to log on. Everyone from Cosmedent is here. And Marshall, are you there? Get him up and running real quick. Hope everyone's week is starting off well.
I'm here.
All right, great, super. All right. Well, as I said before, welcome today. This is the 3rd of the 3 webinars in Cosmedent's winter webinar series. And the first 2 have been fabulous. And I know today's it will be no different. As you can imagine, it's a complex process to put together these programs. And the team from Cosmet includes a number of people. We start off with Dr. Buddy Mopper, who is the chairman of the board and the founder of Cosmet. And then his partner is Mr. Michael O'Malley, who's the president and the CEO. Our vice president of marketing is Catherine O'Malley. Mary Beth Nowak is our vice president of strategic development. And then down in Florida, we've got Robert Mopper, our vice president of sales. Erica Heyer is the director for the Center for Aesthetic Excellence, which puts together all these programs with everyone else. And then Antonio Santoro is the director of digital marketing, and he's the one that makes all this happen, along with Nicholas Barrage, also working in our digital department. Then my name is Bennett Cochran. I'm the export manager for Cosmet, and I'm also the person that you'll be dealing with throughout this. I'm the moderator of the webinars, as well as all of our virtual workshop programs. Now, at the end of today's program, there will be a question and answer session. So please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to ask me any questions, and we'll get through to those once Dr. Hansen's presentation is over. So now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Marshall Hansen is an accredited fellow in the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. He's been practicing for over 15 years since graduating from the University of the Pacific in San Francisco. And dentistry has taken Dr. Hansen all around the world, from California to Arizona, down to New Zealand, and his current practice is in Utah. And all along the way, he has been active as an educator, teaching dentists how to be successful in cosmetic dentistry. Now, after many years of performing all aspects of general dentistry, including doing his own ceramic lab work, Dr. Hansen works with Direct Composite exclusively to offer patients non-invasive smile enhancement treatment options. So it's my privilege to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Marshall Hansen.
Thanks, Bennett. Yep, I am just sharing my screen here with you.
And then don't forget that annotation button at the top, okay?
Yeah, I think I did that earlier today, so it
you
should
have to do it when you restart your screen share.
Each time?
Yeah,
okay.
Each time.
Let's do that again then.
Okay, great. And I will see you at the question period, okay?
Okay, sounds good here. All right, everybody hear me okay and see my screen?
Yeah, everything's coming through just perfectly.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, first off, I just want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy holiday schedules to share an hour with me and allowing me to share something that I feel extremely passionate about, which is direct composite, and how we can use it to enhance people's smiles and really help them to have a more positive, enjoyable life because of that. Before we begin, I'll just share with you that all the landscape photos that you'll be seeing are pictures that I just took from my phone. I enjoy seeing nature, and all of the images of dentistry that you'll be seeing are all direct resin cases, non-invasive, no prep style smile enhancements. Before we begin, I want to share a case with you. And I don't know if you still seeing that green line at the top? Is there a green line, Bennett? It says you're screen sharing?
Yeah, we can see that.
I don't know how to get rid of that.
No, you're good, Dr. Hansen.
Yeah, now
okay. All right. We'll get past that. So I wanted to share this case with you. This, as Bennett mentioned, I had worked for about 10 years toward becoming a fellow with the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And if you in particular want to develop your ability to see things in a new way and enhance your aesthetic abilities, I highly recommend the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry and its accreditation process. I feel like that they have one of the highest standards that we can measure ourselves against in aesthetic or cosmetic dentistry. And it has greatly improved my abilities and helped me to see new things. As I was working through this process toward becoming a fellow, which for those of you, again, who may not be familiar with it, It's probably one of the main ways to be formally recognized as a specialist in cosmetic dentistry today. But as I was working through this process, I did this case here, and I shared this on my social media a few years back because I was proud of it. A young girl had come to me. She felt like her teeth were relatively small and had a little more of a gummy reveal than she wanted to have. And so I did all my own workup. I did my wax up. I used my templates and my depth cuts, tried to be as minimal as possible and as least invasive as I could be on this young girl. I did my own ceramic work for the case and was really proud about how it all worked out. So here was her case. And this particular case was one of the 50 that I submitted for my fellowship that passed. And I liked how it turned out. However, I share this case today because I think differently than I did 4 years ago. If knowing what I know now, I certainly would have done this case in direct composite for 3 reasons. I know that I would have achieved an even better aesthetic result. 2, I would not have had to cut on this young girl's teeth at all. It could have been completely additive and non-invasive. And 3, I know you can't appreciate from this close-up picture, and I apologize I don't have a full face photo. But when we were all done, she and I both recognized that we just felt that the length of those front 4 teeth was just a little bit long for her face. And visually, we just wanted to shorten them a little bit. But because they were ceramic and I had built in some translucency, I was afraid that if I cut those shorter, that I would make them look worse. And so I feel like I didn't achieve as high of an aesthetic result or satisfy her as much as I could have. If these had been composite, it would have been a simple thing for me to do, to just shorten them or refine the shapes even more so with her, even after the fact that they were in place. So I think differently now. And my presentation today is not about technique, and it's not a collection of scientific literature. My presentation today is an invitation to each of us doctors to see and think differently as we consider direct composite resin as an option that we offer our patients, and as we consider the different protocols that we use in aesthetic dentistry. My hope is that at the end of this hour together, that we all will think a little bit different about composite and all the advantages that it has to offer. This right here is also direct composite, non-invasive. Again, I'll just mention it again for this first slide, but all the cases, all the before and afters that you see are all non-invasive, no prep, completely additive, direct composite resin. I believe that there has been a long-standing sentiment held generally among many doctors that direct composite resin is a temporary or even an inferior material. I submit that the reality of direct composite resin is not that anymore, and that the perceived limitations of the past regarding direct composite are less convincing today. And I believe that you'll begin to see as you weigh carefully what I have to share with you today, I believe you'll begin to see the tremendous advantages that direct composite resin can have, not only for you, the doctor, but also for your client, the patient, looking to achieve a highly aesthetic and enduring smile-enhancing result. Now, if we were to outline here the basic tenets of past beliefs regarding direct composite, we may list the following, and some of these may sound familiar to you. You may have spoken these thoughts to yourself or even expressed them directly to an inquiring patient. Do we tell our patients the following about direct composite? Do we say that they are prone to chipping, or that they're prone to discoloration? Do we say that direct composite is difficult to do and often frustrating? Do we tell ourselves that direct resin takes a lot of time, or that they're not as productive, or that in the end, after all the time and effort, that they just aren't aesthetic as other materials? This is the thought process or the basic tenets that I would like to invite us to think differently about, to where our self-talk would argue or contend that rather than them being prone to chipping, that they can be comparable in strength. That rather than prone to discoloration, there are options that are very color stable. Rather than thinking of them as being difficult to do and frustrating, to recognize that there is a simplified protocol that can overcome a lot of those difficulties and frustrations. Rather than us thinking of them taking a lot of time, we might consider instead what our value of time or money versus the time that we're putting things in or putting into this work. That rather than thinking of them not as productive, maybe we might think of them as more productive. And maybe instead of thinking of them not as aesthetic, thinking of them at least comparable, rivaling other materials, and maybe even more beautiful than other materials. I'd like to go through each of these items here on the left and discuss them, and hopefully bring about a different perspective. So, what is the true reality of direct composite today? Let's begin by discussing this first item, chipping. It's a very common question among patients and doctors that will reach out to me and say, oh, do you have issues with this material chipping? And as we look at the materials, and typically with regard to our presentation or discussion today, we're thinking of enamel and dentin, composite, and porcelain, and comparing those as far as their risks versus benefits. And as we know, in dentistry, we often see that enamel and dentin can chip and wear and discolor. That it's a common thing, a common reason why many of us are treating front teeth because of chipping and wear of enamel. So one question I might pose to us is enamel inferior of a material because it can chip or wear? Or are there other factors that we can utilize to our advantage to restore teeth and make them adequately as strong or better protected than before? When it comes to chipping or breaking of any type of material, there are basically two factors. We have the strength of the material versus the strength of the applied force. And for something to chip, again, this is very basic, but the force that is applied to the tooth has to exceed what the material was willing to endure. So let's talk about each of these, strength of the material and strength applied to the material, because both of these things can be managed. And if we manage each of these factors correctly, we can significantly lower the risks of chipping, not only of our restorative material, but also of our patient's natural dentition as well. As we focus on the strength of material, one of the common measurements for strength of material is flexural strength. And there is a basic formula that's commonly used for that, where the flexural strength is a factor of 3 times the maximum force that's applied to the length of the sample material, divided by 2 times the base or width times the depth squared, that gives us our formula for flexural strength. And as we're just looking at the formula, what I want to point out is the principle that if we know the flexural strength of a material, and then we look at the other side of the equation, if we modify the depth or breadth, the width and depth of that sample of material, then we inevitably also would increase the maximum for material if we know the flexural strength. So, and this is very logical. If we have a 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter block of material, it will be easier for us to snap it and break it in half, as opposed to if we had a 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter sample of block and tried to do the same thing. We would have to generate more force. And that's just common knowledge. It's just common logic. What I'm pointing out by this is that if we can use composite resin in a thickness that is appropriate and to our advantage to strengthen our material and make it more resistant to deformation or flexural or functional forces, we can then minimize our risks of chipping. The second factor here is the strength of the applied force. And when we think of functional forces, chewing and clenching forces, many patients, I would say every single one that I've been treating in this last year and a half with direct composites, each of them have what I would refer to as a premature contact within their hinge as their jaw joint hinges close and brings their teeth together. That they have a combination of a premature contact, a spot where they hit first before anything else, or they hit on deflective contacts that causes the jaw to either slightly shift or the tooth to have to flex to accommodate those forces. These interferences and deflective contacts are very common triggers for clenching and grinding or tension headaches, etc. And that's really just our body's attempt to try to clench or grind or push things to make them fit better together, because the way that the teeth are fitting is not coinciding with the arc of closure of our jaw joint. So if we can assess that appropriately and balance the bite and create a shared load among teeth, we can drastically decrease the force per tooth and increase our longevity. So again, if you think of the load of the bite kind of like the weight of a piano, and you only have one or two people trying to lift that piano, and they're not even lifting at the same time, one person's lifting before the other person, someone is likely to get hurt, or at least the risk would be higher. However, if we have 10 people surrounding that piano and they're all lifting at the same time, sharing that load, our chances of failure or breakage or injury is much less. And I think of teeth this way also. So if we can manage the strength of the material through selecting an excellent composite resin with adequate strength, as well as designing it with the appropriate thickness, and then we're also managing the forces by making sure that as they come together, that their load is shared, whether that be in a protrusive position or excursions, that we're sharing that load, we can minimize by many factors the force per tooth and the load and increase longevity. And I have found over the last year and a half that I've just exclusively been doing direct composite that I have not had problems with chipping. Let's talk a little bit more about this because I know this is an important issue. This is a research paper that basically what they did is they took different samples of human tooth tissue, dentin, enamel, and compared that also with other restorative materials such as amalgam, gold, dental resin, ceramics, and composites. And basically what they did is they created samples, as you can see here on the bottom picture, where they cut those samples out of a tooth. And they created 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter by 12 millimeter long samples. And they applied a force to them to see what the maximum force, bending force that those materials could receive before failure. And the interesting part about this is that they found that enamel could, in that dimension, could receive a 6.9 Newton force before failure. And that a dental ceramic and a dental resin could take 2.7 Newtons of force. So it was interesting that they found that there was no significant difference between dental ceramic and dental resin in this study. The interesting thing is that if we take this data and we postulate that if we were to increase the 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter sample to a 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter sample, as we just spoke about, what kind of maximum force then could we project? Well, using the same formulas and the same data here, at a 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter sample, we would expect a maximum force of 10.6 newtons. So based on this, and again, this is estimations, approximations, really just presenting a concept, not science necessarily. But the concept is that if we can increase the thickness of the composite, especially at our incisal edges, to 1.5 to a 2 millimeter thickness, we can be at least comparable to the type of forces or maximum bending force that a 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter sample of enamel could receive before deflection or breakage. So that being said, I think our solution in part is to make our incisal edges 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick. In doing this, I feel confident that I can express to my patients that under these parameters, that the thickness of their composite at the bottom edge can be comparable to the strength of an enamel edge. But even though enamel can chip, that there are other things to address as well, and that's where we talk about the bite and balancing their forces. Here's another case here that I want to focus in that demonstrates some of this concept. This particular patient had had numerous surgeries with her upper and lower jaw, repositioning, suturing, moving the bone. And this is where she had had braces multiple times, and this is where her bite had ended up. She had multiple deflective contacts, a premature contact as well. Things were just not coming together at the same time. So in a non-invasive way, we added to her teeth. This is immediate post-op. You can see some lasering that we did here and the healing that's still happening there. But what I want to show you here is we were whitening her lower teeth, and here on the right of the screen is a 3D photograph of her teeth. And I want to demonstrate here what this looks like. So this is that very same case. Here we've just added. This is another question that some doctors or patients will add to me. Well, are they going to be bulky or too thick or unrealistic? So this was a completely additive process. And here you can see the edges of these restorations are 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick, which gives them the strength, I believe, comparable to what she would have had originally with her 1 millimeter thick enamel. The other thing to note on that slide was you could see how all of the contacts on her posterior were all centered marks. You could see that hopefully in that image. So I just want to show you here how they look in real life, the dynamics of her talking, and so you can compare and see how these can look as well. That will affect you.
Yeah, well, I've had dental work as it is, and I know even in those small steps the impact it's had, but I'm just not really happy with it. So I'm interested and excited about kind of the next level of really being proud of my smile.
I always have to watch the numbers. Okay, now you're going.
So one of the biggest rewards from my time here was fixing my bite or addressing my bite, and it was something that I didn't even think would be part of what I was seeking to do. But Dr. Hansen took all the detail and care in talking to me about what was going on with my bite, what could be impacting, and just the small tweaks that can make a huge, huge difference. And so that's one of the highlights of my experience. Not to mention my absolutely stunning smile, which I'm so excited about, but wins in more ways than one with Dr. Hansen. And it was clear and concise and just an incredible experience.
So here's her case before and after. Again, completely additive. We're not prepping away or weakening their natural tooth structure. And really, this procedure could be reversible. If we went in and carefully, it would be a careful process, but we could go back and remove this composite and get back to her original tooth structure if we wanted to. Here's her before and after smile. So in summary for that, again, if we have the appropriate thickness and we're managing the forces, that's the two factors of strength of the material and the force that's applied to those, we can increase longevity of these type of restorations to where they can be enduring and very comparable to other types of restorations or even to their natural teeth. Let's have a look at the next point, discoloration. And I'll begin to address this question here by stating that not all composites are the same. Over the last 10 years where I've been working to develop new techniques and working with composites, really driven by the goal to be able to offer my patients a non-invasive option. I just felt heavy shaving people's teeth down that were otherwise healthy. They just wanted to change the shape or the color or proportions of their teeth. And even though I was doing my own ceramics, I was in control of their end result, and I would like the end result, I still felt heavy inside. And I noticed that I didn't feel that when I was doing a direct resin composite case. And when I recognized that, it really drove me to say, hey, there's got to be better ways to make this process non-invasive as well as predictable and efficient and something that I could apply and utilize in the practice that I had at the time. And because of that, I've worked with a lot of different composites. And again, I'll say not all composites are the same when it comes to discoloration. Here is a case that I did early on the left. This picture here on the left is 2.5 years after treatment. And you'll notice that that tooth number 8, or for the international doctors, the 1-1, is darker, it's discolored. I'll tell you, and you'll just have to trust me, that when I did it, for the first maybe even up to a year, it blended in quite well. And over time, discolored. And so here on the right, I replaced it using a better material. This material here was of a particular product that was not Cosmodent, I'll say that. This was a case that came to me after 3 years. There was some direct bonding that was placed on the front 4 teeth 3 years ago. This was a bleach enamel shade by another company that's not Cosmodent. And you can see how they just turned tan over time. So we replaced these with a Cosmodent material. So some composites can discolor with time, and I think the reality of that has led to the thought process or belief that all composites can discolor or stain with time. However, this particular case I did on my mother-in-law, probably the year that I got out of dental school. And so I've had multiple opportunities over the years to follow up with her. The interesting thing for me with her case has been that 12 years later, now 13, but 12 years when I took this picture, I could not note any discernible difference in color or any discoloration that's happened over these 12 years. She is a heavy coffee drinker, so I've been very impressed. The interesting thing again about this case, and I apologize it's not viewable here in the picture, but there was an area where I did a repair about 3 years, maybe it was probably somewhere between 3 and 5 years after. I still hadn't figured out the bite yet and other things. I do dentistry a lot better than I did back then, fortunately. But I did a repair using a different material, not a Cosmonet material. This is a Cosmonet Renamel. And the interesting thing is that 12, 13 years later, I can see a discoloration in the material that I used as a repair composite that was not Cosmonet. But all of the rest of the restorations that are still there, the original material has not dulled in its finish. It's kept its polish and it's maintained its color stability. The other thing that I'll share with you as well is that just earlier this last year, I had Robert Mopper, the son of one of the founders here of Cosmodet, come out to one of my hands-on courses, and he showed me on his front tooth a 22-year-old composite veneer of renamel that his father, Buddy, had placed for him. And he admitted also that he is a heavy coffee drinker, and I would say 22 years later, I was interested to see how the color stability was. He told me that it was an A2 when it was originally placed. And if you know about Cosmonet's material, you'll know that they shade match their composites with the Vita Shade Guide. So when he was there, I took the opportunity to grab an A2 shade tab and hold it right up to his tooth to see what the change had been over 22 years. And I'll tell you that his direct composite veneer was not an A3. It was not any darker than the A2 stem shade. So from what I have seen in my own personal experience, I feel very confident that the Cosmodet Renamel brand of material is very color stable. And I'll say also that Cosmodet is the only company that produces composites that I'm aware of that will claim that their composite is 100% color stable. I've seen that in my own experiences, feel very confident with the color stability of this material. And color stability is very important to me. I don't want any of my cases to turn tan like we just showed in those previous cases where just after a few years things had changed. So I want to thank Cosmodet for creating a material that I can feel comfortable and confident with, that it can maintain its color stability and its polish over time. I even found some studies that suggested that this type of microfill composite actually becomes more polished with time. Let's move on to the next point. Difficult to do or frustrating. Yes, I get it, because when I first was working toward developing my techniques or how I was going to implement direct composite, this is what I found. I found it very difficult and frustrating. My experience I found with the techniques that were out there for me to learn about, that layering was very unpredictable. I would find that after I spent all this time layering all the layers and different shades and translucencies of composite, that by the time then later I had shaped them and polished them, I inevitably would remove some of the translucency or some of the effects off of one and not the other. Or one of my layers inevitably was just slightly thicker than it was on the other tooth, and it was noticeable. And it became extremely frustrating for me because I had spent so much time, and then the end result not to find that that was aesthetic or what I wanted was heartbreaking. I also found that sometimes color matching was still difficult to do because so much of it depended on the thickness of the material and how opaque or how translucent the material was. And there's so many different composites out there that have different translucencies and different opacities, that as I was trying different materials, it really was kind of dependent on luck for me. Sometimes I would get a good match and sometimes I wouldn't. And the unpredictability of that made it difficult and more frustrating. And because there were a lot of different techniques and different ways to isolate the teeth, and maybe some of those techniques I wasn't familiar with in the beginning, again, it added to the difficulty and the frustration. However, I would say now, after being really driven in my heart and in my mind to create a rival product aesthetically with direct composite so that I wouldn't have to shave down people's teeth, over these last 10 years, I've developed some very unique techniques that I'm not aware of any other doctors teaching that have solved each of these frustrations for me. I made it a point as I came across the frustration, how do I change this? How do I fix this? What new way can I do, or how differently can I do things to overcome this? And I finally gotten to a point where the system and the approach is so systematic and has become so predictable for me, like a recipe, that I feel very comfortable and confident in this material and the predictable results that we can get with it. Here you can see another direct resin, non-invasive case, how natural and beautiful. All the layering, all the translucency can look uniform using these unique types of techniques that I teach. Let's talk about the next one. Take a lot of time. So when we say it takes a lot of time, what does that really mean? I imagine that most of us work a full day of dentistry. And regardless of what procedure we're doing dentistry. And I would say that probably many of us would say if it took us 3 hours to do a veneer prep, porcelain veneer prep case, then we probably wouldn't say that that took us a lot of time. But if we had the same amount of time doing dentistry just on a different procedure, if we were doing a class 2 and it took us 3 hours, we would say that that took us a lot of time. So really, when we say it takes a lot of time, it's not necessarily the time, but more a factor of the amount of money that's associated, or the productivity that's associated with that effort of time. And so if we're really looking at the truth of it is, it's money versus time, or productivity versus time, rather than the time it takes to do a procedure itself. And if we're considering that, it's important that we also consider all of the other overhead expenses, lab fees, material expenses that can be associated with those particular types of other procedures other than direct composite. And as I have done that and evaluated that, I have found that because of the extremely low overhead of direct composite, these type of procedures can be very profitable, they can be very efficient, and really make a big difference for our patients. Again, here is a non-invasive, no prep, completely additive, natural enhancement for a young lady who was self-conscious of her smile for many years. So we touched on this a little bit, not as productive. I would say that if this is a type of procedure, direct composite is something that speaks to you as a doctor, something that you want to be able to offer your patients, a non-invasive option to enhance their smile, there are ways to restructure your business so that it can be more productive than general dentistry. I'll say that I am more productive now doing exclusively direct composite smile enhancements than I ever was in a traditional practice doing general dentistry, doing everything myself from bone grafting and orthodontics and root canals on molars to dentures and implants, and seeing young patients and old patients, having multiple chairs and multiple hygienists, extremely low overhead, can really make a difference for people. And I can find that there are ways that this can be even more productive than other treatments. Not as pretty. I know they say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think that that's true. We may have different perceptions on what we think is attractive or beautiful. But I think if we look closely at what direct composite can look like when it comes to natural aesthetics, knowing that they are non-invasive, that we didn't have to shave or prep these teeth, we just added to them, that we couldn't help but admit that they are at least comparable, at least a rival with other materials that we have. That being said, there are specific advantages to composite or direct composite that other materials may not have that I would like to discuss here, because yes, there is more. So what are these advantages of direct composite over other materials? Well, for 1, 2, or 3, or 4, it's customizable. We can have predictable color matching because we're in control if we need to lower the value or add some more gray or some more orange. We can do that, and we can modify and customize the restoration until we like the fit. When we use other materials like porcelain, for example, we don't necessarily have that ability to go back and layer different colors. We have control over the color and the shapes and the surface texture. We can create seamless margins when compared with other restorations. This direct composite can be easily repairable, and there's no lab fee, and then, like I mentioned, a very low overhead for this procedure. So let's talk a bit about customizable for predictable matching. Here is a particular case where we were just restoring one tooth, a lateral incisor, on an implant. With direct composite, we could customize the color and the shapes, the translucencies, and really fine tune even the surface polish to get a blend that is less perceptible or unperceptible to the eye. This, I feel, would be very difficult to do, even knowing and have done my own ceramics for many, many years. This is very difficult to do with ceramics and get it right the first time. Whereas with composite, you can create it and then you can have them back for a follow-up and you can still modify it. In fact, in this case here was still a little bright at the cervical after they came back for their first follow-up. So I cut back a little bit, added some more lower value elements to it, layered back over it, just to get it that much closer to undetectable. And that's something that I wouldn't have been able to do and is really an exclusive advantage to direct composite. Another interesting thing as we're just discussing implants, I'll just mention this briefly. This is an article here by Pascal Monnier and his teammates who measured the fatigue resistance and failure mode of adhesively restored custom implant zirconia abutments. They took ceramic inlays, onlays and crowns, ceramic onlays and crowns and composite onlays and crowns and bonded those onto zirconia abutments. And then they tested them to failure. And what they found is that all the composite resin, all of them, 100% of the onlays and crowns survived, whereas the ceramic ones failed. Conclusion, composite resin onlays and crowns bonded to zirconia implants presented a significant higher survival rate when compared to ceramic crowns. This is not an inferior material. Composite resin can be at least comparable, and I feel should be an option that we consider as we think about aesthetics and answering the solutions, creating solutions for our patients. The nice thing again about implants and composite is your crown can always be screw retained. You never have to cement it because you're adding composite to the crown. You can just add over top of the screw hole and blend it in. Again, healthier, an advantage to consider for certain. Here's another implant case where we were able to customize composite crowns on these implants, bonded to zirconia abutments, and customize the translucency, the surface texture, the polish to make these restorations seamless. This would be difficult to do with other restorative materials, in my opinion. Even this case here, a large class 4, if I were to try to restore this with a ceramic veneer, it would be very difficult to achieve a result that looked as nice. And especially if you're using a material that is strong and color stable, these truly can be magnificent restorations and services for our patients. Control over color, shapes, and surface texture. This is something that we don't always have control over with other materials, but we do with direct composite. You'll see here in this case, the only difference between the middle photo and the bottom photo is just the surface texture that I added. And I could add that directly in the mouth, comparing it, looking at it in different angles of light to make sure that I could reproduce that the best that I can to help that restoration be less noticeable. surface texture. I love this picture. It's one from New Zealand. But surface texture is so variable and so beautiful. These little lines here that you can see, really fine lines in the horizon, are the sheep. They make this little terrace as they walk back and forth in New Zealand. It's almost like those little fine lines on enamel. And then you've got your tertiary and secondary anatomy. Nature is beautiful. Here's another case where we only treated the front 2 lateral incisors, 7 and 10, or 1, 2, and 2, 2. Again, because we were able to control the color and the texture and the surface polish, the translucency, we have so much more control, and in my view, so much more predictability to be able to create an undetectable restoration. Here it is up close, and you can see the surface texture of the composite veneer on the lateral versus the natural tooth of the central incisor. Managing color can also be very challenging. Looking at this case here, we see a variety of different tooth colors. And I know that if I were to prepare this for ceramic crowns or ceramic veneers, as soon as I prep into that tooth structure, it's going to get a lot darker and be that much more of a challenge for me to restore. However, and it almost seemed magical as we were doing this and accomplishing this, but in a completely additive way, I didn't prep those teeth back at all. The only thing I did is I shortened the cuspid, number 6, just a little bit, and I shortened number 9 just a little bit because I felt they were too long in her face. But everything else was additive, and we were able to create a seamless transition color-wise without prepping her natural teeth. This is a really special story I'm going to share with you here, a short video from the daughters.
My mom has always been insecure about her smile, so me and my sister entered her into a contest on Instagram to win a free set of veneers, but didn't end up winning. We didn't let that stop us from giving her a new smile. The dentist was located in Utah, so we bought her a plane ticket and a place to stay for 3 days, so here's us flying out to Utah. She was super excited, but also super nervous. As soon as we got there, he wasn't hesitating to get started. The dentist, Dr. Henson, was super nice and decided to give us a discount since we wanted to surprise her with a new smile anyways. A few days later, she had a big reveal. This is a before and after. Ever since we got home, she could not stop smiling.
Such a special case. Her daughters, by surprise, flew her out to do this for her.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
And it just feels so good knowing that we could do this in a non-invasive way, completely additive for her. Here's her case, close up. And her before and after. Tetracycline stains, again, can be a real challenge, and yet with direct composite, it can be much more predictable and less stressful. This is completely additive for her. Here you can see the grayness that she had in her before picture and how we were able to just mask that over. One of the nice things that I like about Cosmonet materials is that they are very opaque, and so they work very well as a blank canvas to block out discoloration and still provide me the room or available space that I need to customize these and make them look natural. So just tell me, how do you feel about your new smile?
Amazing. It took a minute to get used to a perfect smile, but I'm loving it and I'm so happy. And I think now when I smile loudly like I always do, it won't be like embarrassing when I see the candid shots of my gray teeth. Now they're just pretty and I'm so happy. It's amazing. And I have friends asking me who they'd contact to get it done and everything, so you'll be expecting more.
So in summary there, I think direct composite has some huge advantages for us predictability wise to manage colors of the tooth or the composite, translucencies, surface textures, to really refine and accomplish the result that we really want. Another thing is seamless margins. So much more seamless than we can accomplish with other materials. Here is a large class 4 restoration. You can't see the margins. Even if we're closing diastemas, the type of techniques that I use that are unique allow us to create beautiful, undetectable margins that can be healthy for gum tissue. Another advantage, they can be easily repairable. This is an interesting case. This particular patient had crowns and root canals and large posts in her front 2 teeth. And since, though you can see up close that there she started to get some chipping on her porcelain crowns as well as her natural teeth on the lateral incisors. The doctor that I was working with, Dr. Pessoa here, was concerned about removing these crowns, that if we cut them off, there just really wouldn't be a lot left structurally to the tooth. So he and I came up with an idea to just prepare these crowns as if they were teeth for new porcelain veneers. And so I made these Emax porcelain veneers that I bonded onto those 2 ceramic crowns. And then I did composite veneers, non-invasive additive resin on the 2 lateral incisors. We also addressed her bite, removing a lot of those interferences and imbalances that were leading to chipping and wear on the enamel and porcelain. So again, chipping on enamel and chipping on porcelain, chipping on composite doesn't make any of them inferior. It just means that there's some forces that we ought to address and can. And what I wanted to point out in this image here also is very difficult to discern the difference between the Emax veneers on the front 2 incisors and the composite veneers on the 2 side laterals incisors. Again, very, at least comparable. Composite can rival ceramics. And again, we mentioned a little bit earlier, with these particular procedures, there are no lab fees and a very low overhead procedure. Other doctors that I know who are doing exclusive composites typically run at less than 20% overhead. So if you're on average and your overhead is 60% and you're bringing home 40%, this type of model at a less than 20%, let's just say it's 20% overhead, allows you to take home 80%. So you can really double your income with a low overhead procedure. Interesting. This type of work can really be life-changing, especially for young patients that we wouldn't consider prepping their teeth because of their age especially. But in this time when they're in their high school years or early college years, when their confidence matters so much to the decisions that they make and how they approach people and the confidence that they have to address challenges or people in their life really can make a huge difference. There are tremendous advantages. And in my view, from my perspective, I see composites as predictable, highly aesthetic, and non-invasive. This particular patient here felt like he had a rainbow. That's what he meant. That's what he said. He had a rainbow of his edges on his teeth, and we just wanted to correct that. So we added some length, broadened his smile a bit, and enhanced the color. Here you can see from different angles. Non-invasive dentistry. Here's a few more examples. At least I hope that you can see that direct composite can be a very beautiful material, has tremendous advantages. These are 3 of my daughters. I have 4 kids, an older son, 3 of my daughters here in New Zealand on a black beach, and the beautiful reflection that happens there. A composite can be a very comparable, by far not inferior, and enduring material that we can select as an option for our patients. And there is yet one other reason to consider direct composite, and that is because our world of cosmetic dentistry is different than it was a few decades ago. Because of the advent of social media, of the internet, of blogs and Google, more and more patients they have access to more information regarding their options when it comes to cosmetic dentistry, more than they ever had before. And so all they have to do nowadays is to go online and they can type in, and I did this a few years ago, I just typed in cosmetic or veneers, smile makeover. And I want to show you a few things that our patients have access to now that they didn't have access to a few decades ago. And I pulled these examples just directly from the websites after doing a search for veneers or makeover. And what patients are finding is they're seeing what it looks like, what traditional tooth preparation looks like in order for their teeth to receive ceramic crowns or veneers, and they don't want it. They don't want to prep down their teeth. More and more patients I feel are coming that I've interacted with share a very similar story. They say, you know, doc, I've had these insecurities with my smile for many years and I've really wanted to do something about it, but I've been hesitant because I didn't want to shave down my teeth. I didn't want them to grind down my teeth, the little nubs. So I've just been living with this insecurity for so long. These are the kinds of things here that are on the internet that's available for your patients. This one quoted here said, preparing my teeth, I learned meant grinding them down to little nubs. These are photos submitted by actual patients of their own teeth, telling their own stories online. Quote, he said he would need to roughen my tooth enamel to enable the veneers to stick. I wasn't surprised, therefore, when he numbed my mouth and started polishing away. When I looked in the mirror, I saw my previously healthy teeth had been drilled down to tiny, misshapen stubs. When I see that, it just makes my heart sink. Quote, I went to run my tongue over my teeth, and it recoiled like a slug that had been salted. What was left were short, pencil-like pikes. I looked in the mirror and shuddered. Nosferatu grinned back at me. And I didn't know who Nosferatu was, so I had to look him up. And here's a picture of him from the old black and white movies. You can notice the resemblance there. And then he said, the patient, no changing my mind now. There was a 2012 report claimed against dentists involving porcelain veneers doubled between 2005 and 2010. And earlier this year in 2015, which is when this article came out, the United Kingdom had 6 leading specialist dental societies published a dramatic joint statement in the British Dental Journal expressing concern at the risks of increasingly popular cosmetic dentistry, describing cases of permanent damage to teeth caused by veneers as a worrying and growing problem. Here's the journal there. The desire for the alleged perfect smile needs to be tempered with an awareness of the significant risks, they wrote. They also suggested ethical problems with some dentists not being honest about the risks, namely that aggressive reduction of sound tooth structure results in structurally weakening of teeth. For sake of time, I'll just skip. Well, I'll read this real quick. Drilling can trigger inflammation and swelling within the pulp, causing excruciating pain. The swelling can eventually strangle the pulp vessels supplying the tooth. This causes the nerve to die and so kills the tooth. He says 1 in 10 veneered teeth will need root canal treatment to remove the dead pulp and nerves and clear infection, followed by a crown, which requires more of the natural tooth to be removed. If you have 16 to 20 teeth veneered, you will likely need root canal treatment for at least 2 teeth, which you risk losing entirely. That's because as many as 10 to 15% of root canals fail, he says. This will cause more pain and need another root canal or surgery plus a new crown. If that fails, the tooth has to be extracted. And every time you replace your veneers, you put them at risk again, says Dr. Hill. I've seen people in their 50s losing teeth after having veneers in their 20s. The next step is an expensive implant, a bridge, an artificial tooth with a crown on either side, or dentures. Point is, this is the type of information that's now available to our potential patients. And I'm convinced that more and more consumers are seeking solutions to their dental aesthetic concerns that require little to no irreversible removal of their natural tooth structure. And I believe firmly that those doctors who can confidently offer their patients highly aesthetic yet minimally invasive treatment options will be increasingly sought after. And you can do it. Each of you can, if this is something that aligns with your belief system and what you want to offer your patients. Of course, you will need to train yourself, and that can take practice and take time. If that's the case, I do offer composite veneer virtual mentorship. If you go to marshallhansondentistrycourses.com, you can find my mentorships, my online course content, access to hands-on workshops, etc. And I do want to encourage more and more doctors to be able to offer their patients less invasive treatment options. I just feel it's better, and all the advantages that I spoke of here. So as a promotional code, if you go onto that website, if you're interested in learning more with us, you can type in the promo code COSMIDENT Webinar 2020 and receive $700 toward your online course and mentorship. Last thing that I just want to go to, I know we're running out of our minutes here, but this is an important question. Why go to all the effort? If we've been doing things a certain way for a long time, why does it matter? Why go to all the effort to try to train ourselves and learn new materials, learn new techniques to be able to offer our patients a less invasive option? To answer that question, I want to share this last story here. This right here is an elder, let's see if I can't move that. An elderly parishioner stunned Spanish cultural officials with an alarming and unauthorized attempt to restore a prized Jesus Christ fresco. It held pride in the Sanctuary of Mercy Church, Zaragoza, for more than 100 years. The woman took her brush to it after years of deterioration. Cultural officials said she had the best of intentions and hoped it could be properly restored. So here's the image here on the left. You can see the damage there. This is how we might imagine the original would have been. And then we can see after years of moisture, deterioration, how that would have affected that painting. Special painting for people. And so in an effort to make things better, this parishioner decided to fill in, repair it, restore it. And this is the end result. My question is, was that restored? Or was the defect just filled in? What is the value of a true restoration? When we think of the work that we do and how intimate it is for people's mouths and their smile and their confidence and how that connects them to other people, these things are really important. And so when there are things that we care about, when they break down, or they discolor, or they break, what will we do? When things that matter to us deteriorate. Here you can see some amazing true restorations of some important photographs for people. How will we address it? That's the choice for us. And that is why I feel like it's so important that we train ourselves to offer the very best to our patients so we can truly restore these things that are so important to their everyday lives. So in summary, direct composites. I would invite you to think of direct composite as comparably strong. that it can be color stable, that you can have seamless margins, that you can employ this material with a very simplified protocol that's predictable and allows you to achieve aesthetic results that are very beautiful. So I appreciate your time. If you have questions, I think Bennett's going to open it up here for questions. But the most important thing, the thing that I feel most strongly about, is that this offers our patients a non-invasive option to enhance their smile without sacrificing the structure of their teeth. Hopefully you think a little bit differently about direct composite, you feel inspired, and pursue a road that allows you to offer your patients less invasive, smile enhancing options. Thank you.
And thank you, Marshall. So Marshall, if you could go ahead and turn the screen share off, that'll get your picture out for everyone to see.
Thanks, Bennett.
And we do have quite a few questions today. Let me get my document open. Where is it? We go right there. All right, great. There's quite a bit of questions about composite discolorations. Are there, you've talked about a little bit, seeing composites come in. What are the options for managing discolored composite veneers? And since we have so many questions, I'd start at the beginning. Is there anything that you do when you place a composite that helps to ensure long-term color stabilization?
Good question. Yeah, so I've done lots of experiments with different composite samples, soaking them in coffee for months at a time to examine and see what happens to these materials. What I've discovered is that if the composite is highly polished, and maybe you need to just enhance your polishing technique or your protocol, or if there's any air inhibited, oxygen inhibited layer of composite, those can pick up stain. So if you're using a deoxygenating gel, like a deox or even a glycerin gel over top of your surface when you've added your final layer and then cure it, you'll make sure that there's no air inhibited layer. And then if you can go through a protocol that allows you to accomplish a high polish, you're much less likely to see staining. And if you do see staining, it's often superficial staining, especially when you're using a material like Cosmedent's material that doesn't discolor itself. Just like teeth can have superficial stains, this material can act just like that if you get film or plaque on them. But that can just be polished away, just like you would on your natural teeth. So I would say in managing discoloration, it's selecting a color stable composite, managing it well when you're placing it, ensuring that you have a highly finished, excellent finish on your surface, and that you just plan to see your patients regularly for follow-ups, offering to do a polish as needed to maintain things just as you would natural teeth.
All right, great, thank you. Now getting back to the thickness of the veneer, somebody wanted to know if a patient's eating an apple, with big bites, without being afraid to crack any of the composites. How do you ensure that? Is there something you do to create that, that resistance to chipping?
Good question. So yes, I talked about how the thickness is important to strength, but just like natural teeth can chip, I would say that these at a 2 millimeter thickness or 1.5 to 2 millimeter thickness can be comparable in strength to enamel, but there are things that can chip enamel too. And so I share that with my patients. I let them know that if it will require a force that would chip a natural tooth in order to chip this material. And so there still are things that we want to do or that they would want to do to minimize those risks. So things like not using their teeth as tools to open up bags or cut threads, being cautious with things like eating chicken off of a bone or corn on the cob. If they can use caution with those types of things, and their teeth will let them know if there's a excessive force on there, they'll be aware of that. So I think bringing that to their attention and letting them know that they can lower their risks for those type of things if they're careful with them, just like they would with their natural teeth.
All right, great. On endodontic treated first molars, specialists recommend crowning them to protect breakage. So after treatment, can this doctor just use composite for a tooth that has two cusps or one cusp?
Good question. That's a good question. And I would have to say it may depend on the composite. It may depend on how much tooth structure there's there, how much enamel has been preserved. I do know and believe strongly, and there is research out there to show that if you have a tooth and you have removed the enamel from it, it is much weaker and would then need a ceramic or strong material to replace the enamel. In most all of the cases that you saw me present today were non-invasive. So we're not removing enamel and weakening the tooth and trying to replace enamel with composite. We're adding to it. So if it were a back tooth and it has a root canal and it had a deep cavity at one point and it's structurally not as strong and it's missing some enamel, I think you're better off with a ceramic restoration. Try to be as conservative as you can. But yes, I think composite can work well when we're adding to and not replacing enamel.
All right, great, good answer. Now, when you talk about discoloration, I just found another question. I want to come back to that. Have you found that some of the composites use different photo initiators than Cosmodents?
Yes. Yeah, the formulas are, from what I've seen, are different. From brand to brand, you'll see different ingredients, different products, different chemicals. Yes, and I'm not a material scientist, but I've just seen the list of the different products that are found when we're comparing composite to composite. So yes, there are different photo initiators and different brands of composites. Everyone's trying to improve them in different ways, make them unique.
All right, super. What would you do with a patient that has direct composite if you know that they are grinding their teeth?
So it's important to address the causes, the reasons why they're grinding their teeth. The great majority of patients who do have a tendency or history of clenching and grinding is often our body's attempt to try to mesh and make things fit better together. If there's an interference with how the jaw of the joint hinges closed and how the teeth mesh together, if there's a discrepancy there that causes the jaw to shift or the tooth to flex, that can be uncomfortable. And so especially at nighttime when our body's trying to repair and recover and rebalance, our brain may say, let's clench to try to push that tooth into a better position so it doesn't have to shift, or try to grind away those interferences to make things fit better together. So if you as a doctor can identify those premature contacts or interferences and eliminate those to help that patient accomplish a more balanced and shared forces with their bite, you can drastically minimize the tendencies or risks that those patients will clench and grind, because our bodies don't like to work harder than they need to. And if there's nothing for them to fix and clench or grind away at, our musculature here can be much more at ease, much more peaceful, and we can minimize those significant forces of clenching and grinding and help increase longevity of not just the restorations that we do, but of the patient's natural teeth as well.
And how would that information affect your choice of composite?
Well, I think that
I think they were looking for, not necessarily, affect the type of composite. I guess if I were to try to, translate that question, would you use a nano hybrid, a micro hybrid, and a micro fill in those scenarios?
Oh, yes. Yeah, good question. So I'm using a combination of either a nano or micro hybrid for strength on incisal ledges, and I'm using a micro fill for the final facial surface and polish.
Mm-hmm. And a question just popped up, which kind of goes right back to that grinding. Do you ever increase VDO?
Yes. Yes, there are cases where you need to do that. So yeah, I'll just say yes sometimes.
All right, great. Now, let's see. What dental adhesive are you using for these? And this is a two-part question. What dental adhesive are you using, or what, and also what type of adhesive is that?
So if I'm bonding to enamel, I'm using a total etch adhesive system. So we're micro etching the tooth after we've cleaned it. We're etching it with phosphoric acid, drying it, applying our bonding adhesive, and then applying our composite after that. I've used a number of different brands, and so I'm still evaluating those different brands. But it is a total etch system when we're bonding to enamel, which most of my cases are because we're just adding and not prepping the teeth.
Okay. Do you ever use a dental fiber like Ribond in restorations?
Yeah, I have before, and I think that they can definitely be helpful if you are into dentin and you want to strengthen the tooth structurally or try to recreate some of that dentin enamel junction. I think there's research out there to show that they can definitely help strengthen the tooth. So I think that there's a place for that. And I think if you learn how to use it, I think you can, especially when you're into dentin. If you're just bonding to enamel, I don't think that it's necessary. I think we can get a tremendously good bond to enamel.
All right. And then along that bonding thread, there's a case where number 7 was missing. Did you restore with composite over the zirconia abutment? And how was the composite bonded to that?
Yeah, good question. So in that particular case, we milled out a composite crown to fit that zirconia abutment. And then we used a zirconia primer. We micro-etched and roughened up the surface to use zirconia primers and etches to bond to that zirconia. And we luted and bonded that crown to the zirconia abutment. And then after that, and we placed it in, then we still have the ability to customize it. So we can cut back some of that composite crown, put in our natural effects, our tints and opacers, and add to that composite with new composite to customize the color and get the blend that we're looking for.
All right, great. You've got a lot of very bright smiles there. Would you recommend placing teeth that are whiter than the whites of the eyes, or do you think that might look a little artificial?
So I don't mind if they are a little bit lighter than people's eyes. I know, for example, the whites of my eyes are a little more reddish yellow because I sunburned them quite a bit when I was younger, out on the beaches and being a lifeguard and other things that I did when I was younger. So, and there are other people that have much whiter whites of their eyes than I do. So I think as far as selecting a color for your patient, I think it's all custom to the goals that the patient has, what they're looking for, what you think could be appropriate for them. There are certain complexions, for example, that I think can handle a brighter look than others. And so I think it's just using your judgment and working best to help accomplish the goals that the patient has.
Great, super. Now, when you are working with like a class 3 or class 4 restoration, are you beveling the teeth before you place the composite?
No, I'm not beveling, and that kind of goes into my techniques that I talk about in my hands-on or my online courses and things like that. But no, I don't. With the techniques that I use, I don't see any need to bevel or remove any more enamel. We can make these restorations all additive.
Okay, great. In your polishing protocol, how do you get invisible margins?
Yeah, that kind of goes into more technique stuff too. I don't know that I could answer that here. but I could invite you if you want to know those type of things. It's all laid out in detail in my online classes or hands-on workshops.
All right, great.
Thanks.
And okay, that question just popped up. We obviously just answered that question too. A number of people are wondering how you create your fees, what you charge for these types of restorations.
That's a great question too. So my fees have definitely evolved over time. I think that the best way that we could charge for our dentistry is to charge for our time. And I'll just do a little side note here, because here's the dilemma that I think a lot of us doctors face, and I did as well. That many of us doctors we've got lots of overhead, we've got student loans, we have a dental practice, we've got a home and a family, lots of overhead. Patient comes into us and there's a cavity on a tooth. And so now we have the dilemma of deciding, do we recommend a large composite or do we recommend a ceramic indirect restoration? And we think to ourselves, okay, it's going to take me an hour to do either one. An hour, and if I did a crown, it's $1,200, or an hour and it's $200 if I do a composite. What am I going to do? And I think there's this moral dilemma that we face that can be really challenging. And I think that if we could get as a profession to the point where we could just charge for our time and say, hey, okay, this will take an hour. Either way, I'll charge you for my hour of time. There's no more moral dilemma for us to try to decide or convince our patient one way or the other. We just do the right thing for the patient and we get paid for our time involved. So I've always felt strongly about that. And so most of my fees are time-based. And I consider, okay, well, how much do I need to produce, or how much am I willing to produce an hour times how many hours is this case going to take me? And that's my case fee. And that's what I offer to the patient. So every fee is different. I don't have a per tooth fee. It's case-based, time-based fee. And I feel best about that, because then if the patient needs something a little extra or not, and I can fit it into the time, then I just do it anyway. And I think that it's great. And the patients don't have to worry about paying more or less, depending on how the day goes. It's just an all-inclusive fee. And so when I was first starting off with doing these type of procedures, my fees were much lower. I was doing some of these cases for free just so that I could practice them on really kind patients. And then as I gained more confidence and started implementing more predictable techniques, then I felt comfortable raising my fee a little bit. So then it went to $300 a unit, and then to $500, and it kind of moved up to where it is now. But I think that if we can have a concept more, instead of a tooth-based or a per procedure based, we think of how could this fit time-based for us. I think really that's the best way for patients and us.
Great. Two more questions. One is a dentist wants to know, he did a class 3 restoration, and after a year he sees some brown stains between the tooth and the composite. He wants to know what should he do, and does he have to remove the whole filling? And then, conversely, was there a mistake that led to those stains?
So if there is a stain, then it's one of two things. Either it was an area that wasn't polished, or it's an area that has debonded due to some flex and functional flexing of the tooth. And so if there is some failure there on the composite, I would think about a few different things. I would think, okay, what's the flexural forces that are on this tooth, and assess the bite. Because if there's a tooth that's hitting on an incline when they bite, and that flexing is happening over and over again, there's going to be a higher risk for failure or debonding there. So that could be one issue that could be adjusted with addressing the bite. Second thing is maybe there was some contamination. Maybe there was some fluid or humidity. Even just breathing humidity can be enough moisture on the tooth to affect our bond strength. So making sure that you you manage the humidity and the moisture when you're bonding. I think it's really important, and that can increase our bond strengths and the durability of our bond. Another thing could be that if it wasn't polished, flexural, yeah, or maybe we bonded some to dentin and it's not all enamel, and we've got two different materials that we've bonded to, some dentin and some enamel. Well, that's going to be different as well. And there's really different ways to bond to dentin and different ways to bond to enamel. And so I think understanding how can we best bond to dentin versus how do we best bond to enamel, and how can we combine those techniques if we're treating both of those in the same tooth. And one thing I'd recommend to the doctor with the question is pursuing the biomimetic restorative protocols and learning the best science out there on how to bond best to dentin, how to bond best to enamel, how to incorporate that into a workflow so that you can really minimize your risks of debonding and increase the longevity of your restorations.
Great, good answer. Now, here's the last question, and probably 6 people asked this in one form or another, but what are your can't live without Cosmodet materials and polishing items?
Wow. Well, the composite material itself, I love the Cosmodet material. I use nano, microhybrid, and microfill on all my cases. So that's a must-have there. I also really enjoy the discs. The blue discs and the coarse discs I use a lot on every case, and I don't know that I could accomplish the same refinement without those discs. I love how flexible they are, how thin they are. They allow me to get into areas and create the contours that I want. So I would say probably those would be the two main things. Of the color stability in the composite's huge for me as well.
All right, fantastic. Good questions, everyone. Loved your answers. It was a great webinar. There's a lot of comments here from people that were saying just exactly that. They were thanking us and you for a great presentation. I think everyone got a lot out of it, and we're looking forward to learning more and more from you, Dr. Hansen. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, just in closing, if you have additional questions or you feel strongly about implementing these type of procedures in your practice, feel free to reach out to me, Marshall Hansen Dentistry, or find me on Instagram, send me a message. I'm happy to help you and answer questions if I can. Again, I feel really strongly about non-invasive smile enhancement with direct composite, and I really want to help more doctors be able to offer less invasive options to their patients to shave down less teeth and still accomplish very beautiful, predictable results for their patients. So feel free to reach out to me, and thank everyone. Thank you for taking the time out and spending this time with us to discuss this. Thanks, Cosmodet, for great products that allow me and other doctors like me to do this kind of work.
Our pleasure, and thank you very much. And have Dr. Hansen have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone else out there.
Merry Christmas. Be right back.